There we go. There we go. That's what I was aiming for. He's slow.
Yeah.
Eventually he'll get to it. Okay, for all of you, meeting starting. For those of you who may or may not know me, I am Tom Curry, and I am the current president of the Saguaro Astronomy Club, for better or for worse. So stick with me here, and we'll get through this, and hopefully eventually get back to meeting in person. Although I do like these Zoom meetings. We actually get more people attending our Zoom meetings than we had at the Grand Canyon University facility, even on a good night. So it's not all bad. Let's see, please use the question and answer tab at the bottom or top of your screens for the attendees. If you have a question of one of us, and you can chat amongst yourselves, the chat room should be open. So you can do that. Our next meeting is July the 23rd, and our presenter was going to be tonight's presenter, but tonight's presenter unfortunately had a death in the family and could not make it. So we do appreciate tonight's presenter, whom you'll meet shortly, Dr. Frank. Is it Timms or is it Timmy's? Timms? How do you pronounce that last?
Timmy's, but I answer anything.
Timmy's? Okay, well that's okay. I just didn't want to insult you by saying Timmy's.
That's all good.
But we do have two member presentations tonight. The first from Paul Lind, and then the next from Terry Shea. The only thing I had of presenting wise was a couple weeks ago, one hot Sunday evening, I was out at the airfield and took a photo of the new moon and Venus as it was getting towards the horizon. So
Yeah, nice, very nice.
It was still a beautiful evening. It was, when the sun finally got down, it was quite comfortable, the slightest of breezes, a beautiful night to be out stargazing, but I think almost all of them are. So quite a deal.
Waiting for you, Jerry.
Okay. I tell you what, Paul, do you want to tell us what was happening at the telescope making group? Your mic's off.
Sure. Yeah, I can do that. Is that all the business?
Unfortunately, with Zoom, there is very little business.
Okay. Uh-oh, what happened here?
There you go. Should be there.
Okay. I'm not at the beginning, I guess. Okay. The telescope making group has been meeting since March, and in person, which has been very fortunate, but we haven't had very many members that are fully vaccinated. So let me take you through that quickly. March 23rd, here's a picture of Lynn Blackburn at my grinding machine table, working on a 6-inch, which we've been doing as a club project. You can see a couple things here. Down in front is a spherometer that we use to measure curves. He's working on a 6-inch F5 mirror, doing some rather rough grinding. I think it's 80 grit. This is my grinding table, which I will describe later. And over here in a corner, this bluish thing is a tabletop polishing machine, which is sometimes known as a Miromatic. Anyway, we weren't using that. And up here, in case we're having a lot of trouble, we've got crowbars and such. We can destroy these mirrors and start over. Anyway, at that meeting, we had Mitch and Lori Prowsey, Joe Goss, and here's Ken Millward. This is looking south in my shop. There's a 9 1/4 inch Celestron here, and my lathe and my milling machine and stuff. So we have plenty of room, and when we meet, we have fresh baked cookies and some drinks. Let's see. Okay, April 20th. I think you know Michael Popri. He's working on the same mirror and the same table. And I love his shirt. In my defense, I was left unsupervised. Yeah. So May 19th, I had no pictures. Our secretary is Rick Rotrammel, who's over here looking over the bottom of his screen. And since he hadn't been there yet, we had very little documentation because he always takes pictures. But Ken Millward was there and Glenn Nishimoto. We actually got very little done at that meeting except a lot of BS. Anyway, this week had quite a crew. Here's Rick Rotrammel again taking notes, and which he does very well. And I've got to get my notes about some of these people, but this is Tom Mosden with his relatively long hair. I always kid Tom about this because when I last saw him back before the pandemic, he had short hair. And my dad, way back in the Stone Ages, my dad always referred to professors, and teachers, and musicians as long hairs. That was a noun, okay? Well, Tom his barber passed away and he hasn't got a new one yet. And in this picture, these legs belong to Barbara Mosden. And now I don't have my notes. I have to remember her name, which I can't remember. And this is Kiana, her boyfriend. But this young lady is a PhD astrophysics student at ASU. Oh, in the center here is our refreshment table. We always have some soft drinks and chocolate chip cookies. And the Mosdens brought a cooler full of flavored soda drinks. Oh, and this table here I've made recently. This is a grinding table designed by some guys in New England, and it's really sturdy if you put weights in the bottom. Now those guys use patio bricks, but I had a lot of steel and aluminum, so that's what I did. Anyway, here are some of the same people, except here's Barbara Mosden and me demonstrating my grinding machine. And what else? Oh, another corner of the polishing machine. So this is, I have a picture here I wanted to show of my grinding machine, which I took just today, and I don't have video cropping, so when I show this, it'll be smaller, but there you see it working. This is an off-center cam driving the arm back and forth, and I could start that again, actually. The spindle is driven by a variable speed DC motor, and the cross arm likewise is driven by a variable speed motor, and the controls are down there. So here's another picture of fine grinding. This is a 30 micron grit, which is pretty small. It's about 1/1000th of an inch. And here is Kageyama grinding on the same mirror, which he shouldn't be doing because he was working on the 8-inch in the background on 80 grit. And we made him wash his hands and so forth before he worked on the very fine 30 micron grit. So I think that's the end of my slides. And I guess if anybody has any questions, I can answer those.
Yeah, I got a quick question for you there, Paul. What's the average timeline to grind out a mirror all the way to polish? Is it a couple months, a year?
Oh,
years?
yeah, it can be when I was a teenager, I think I did it in a month, but yeah, it can be months. Yeah. And if you wait too long, the pitch polishing lap will get hard and it makes a big problem. You have to make a new one. So probably next time we will pour a lap for this 6-inch mirror. I don't know if that answers your question, but
sure. No, thank you.
Usually it takes quite a while if it's a club project.
Okay. Well, let me ask you another one. Between grinding, say like a 6-inch mirror and an 8-inch, is that like, does that go up in difficulty like geometrically, or is it just a little bit harder, or is it a whole different?
I don't, geometrically, I'd say it goes up maybe linearly. It takes considerably long on rough grinding. Polishing is always at least 6 to 10 hours. So I don't know. The biggest mirror I made was a 14-inch, but I polished it on a machine. So I really can't tell you. I think it takes almost as long, but there's very little elbow grease required.
Okay. All right.
And now I don't know how to get out of this screen.
Okay,
Maybe I just,
go back to your sharing and unshare. Just click down at the lower right corner where you're at your share.
I'm looking for it, but I don't
Bottom.
show all.
Share.
Wait a minute. I'll just, uh-oh. Am I still on there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you should still be on, or I mean, you are on. Do you see your toolbar at the bottom or at the top and see the green square for the sharing?
Yeah.
Okay, click into that and you should be able to then end share.
Zoom share. How do I end it?
It should be, no, it'll be in the green at the, or at the top.
Says your screen is sharing. Oh, stop share.
There you
Okay.
go.
Finally.
Wow, I feel like such an expert to be able to talk you through that. And last week I had to go to remedial Zoom school because it's like, we're only doing this once a month. And it's like, wow, it's kind of like sex. If you only get it once a month.
Yeah, I should comment that a couple of those pictures were taken by Rick Rotrammel. He took several more, but I didn't include them because they were kind of redundant to what I had taken.
Okay.
And Rick really needs a modern digital camera. He's got one of the first ones ever produced, I think. And its ASA rating is real low. He has to use a flash all the time. So sorry about that, Rick, but you do take great pictures.
I've got a newer one.
Oh, yeah.
He's been holding
The one
out.
I'm using is a Sony, and it's newer than that Kodak one I had before.
Well, I knew a guy with a Sony camera that had a floppy disk in it. You could take about 3 pictures, and they were like 480 by 600 or something.
No, these are good. They're like 4 meg or 8 meg. Back in the current era.
Yeah.
Us old guys, I mean, it's film or nothing. I'm heartbroken. I don't know what to do with all my Nikons. And it's just like, yeah, I make bookends out of them. And it's just like, oh man, back in the day, I'd been offered a lot of money for those, but not anymore. They're kind of.
Got a couple old Canons.
Yeah, my
In
wife
fact,
had a whole series of.
I've got a speed graphic press camera.
Oh, nice. Large format. You should use that at star parties. Well, thank you, Paul. And if there are no more questions for him, tell you what, I will let Terry go ahead and take over. He's got some photos from the North Rim. Lucky bastard.
Okay. Let's try this out. Okay, can you see my desktop here?
Yeah.
2021 North Rim.
Okay. Well, let's see if I can get that. There you go, full
There
screen.
you go.
So yeah, a couple of weeks ago, we were up at the North Rim, right? Star parties, everything is really great. It's going to be cool. We showed up and hey, where was everybody? So yeah, unfortunately, right, it was canceled, but just took this shot, you know, a little sad. You know, normally this would be the veranda full of telescopes and people, but not the case. We had made our reservation back in February, and they canceled the star party, but I just thought, well, you know what? The sky will still be dark, so let's go ahead and go anyway. So me and Rosemary went up there. It was pretty nice. It was actually quite cold. Before we left, I kind of looked at the weather, and I on the fence about bringing my winter coat, and I was very glad I did bring it. Nights were, Phoenix cold, right? Low 40s. I think the first night it was down to 39. So quite chilly. And of course, you go up to the Grand Canyon for the view. In particular, this view was really good. This was a really good view. One interesting thing is if you look here on the horizon, you can see a smoke plume out here. So there was a forest fire going out here towards Flagstaff. Driving out there, we kind of went right through that smoke, and I was hoping it wouldn't cause any issues. And for the most part, it didn't. So that worked out mostly. And then let's see here. So the first night, we were out at Angel Point there, right off of the veranda, just east of the veranda, and took this photo here. This is a nice wide angle, and you'll notice here on the horizon this yellow plume. That's the smoke plume with the lights from Flagstaff illuminating it. So that shows up pretty much in every photo. So that's kind of the theme for the days we were up there. Okay, so yeah, this photo turned out pretty nice. I was happy with this one, about 60 seconds. And these are all single shot, single color pictures. And here's another one, basically the same setup. Really, it's just another 30 seconds on here. So this one was 90, little brighter, although it starts to tend to get a little washed out as, I go up to like 120 or 2 minutes. And let's see, and then swung the camera around here. So here we got a picture of the summer triangle here. Here we got Vega up here, and Cygnus is over here. And we got the rift coming in here. So this one turned out nice. Got a little bit of sky glow down here. This was probably maybe about 11:30 at night, I think. And let's see here. And then here, again, kind of swung back the other direction again, did a lens change here. So here we have a 24 millimeter, a little more magnification. This one has a nice capture here of the dark horse, showed up pretty well here. And again, the smoke on the horizon is just going to be a common theme.
Scorpius looks really good too.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, the sky is just so dark up there. It's just wonderful. But yeah, Scorpius showed up good. Everything went pretty well once it got dark. I will say though, this first night, most of the day it was overcast, and even in the early evening, it was fully overcast. The clouds actually cleared out about 10:30, which I was very happy about. And let's see here. Here, just kind of another shot there, a little different settings. And let's see, and then swinging the camera back over to the north here. We got the North American Nebula starting to show up here a little bit. We got the coat hanger up here in the corner. I always like looking for that. That's always a neat astrum to look for. And so that was the first night. So the second night, we had something very interesting happen. So we were out on the veranda about 5:30 in the evening here. And this is looking southeast towards Flagstaff, right? Here's Mount Humphrey. And there's this funny light in the sky. And I'm looking at this thing, and it's like, that's not supposed to be there. There is no planet there. There is no bright star that would show up at 5:30 in the afternoon or 6 o'clock maybe. It was very odd. We sat there staring at it, and I'm telling my wife, that's not supposed to be there. we're staring at it and I'm thinking, well, it's got to be an airplane, right? We're looking at it and it is not moving. This thing is stationary and not moving at all. So it's like, this is very odd. So snapped a few pictures of it. We were looking at it. This cloud bank kind of rolled in and rolled in front of it. So we just kind of sat down for a while, waiting for it to clear. Probably about 10 or 15 minutes later, the cloud bank cleared and of course it was gone. It's like, okay, this is very, very strange. Got a little bit of a zoom in on it. Again, not much to see, kind of a funny guitar pick shape there. And we were just wondering, like, what the heck is this thing? So I figure, well, you know, it's not, not an airplane because it just kind of sat there. Hey, maybe there's a supernova. You know, we've been out of touch with the news up there at the canyon. So just kind of hopped on my phone, did a quick search, and it's like, nope, nothing going on there. So just figured out it had to be an airplane. So when we got back to town, my wife has a number of friends who live in Prescott, and they were talking to her and saying, hey, did you see that light in the sky? And she's like, really? What, you know, when did you see it? Turns out same day, same time, a whole nother group of people saw it from Prescott, and they too took fuzzy pictures like mine. So I was like, wow, this is really weird. So I did an internet search and I came up with a hit. And, you know, to be a little cliche, yes, it was a weather balloon.
Oh, Lordy.
So apparently NASA had launched this weather balloon over in New Mexico, and it basically floated west across Arizona. And from where we were, it was hitting right at, you know, right before sunset, and it just lit up the, you know, whatever the material is, Mylar or whatever it is, it just lit it up like a light bulb. So it's like, that was very interesting. It was very odd seeing a light in the sky that's not supposed to be there. So we got that figured out. That was kind of fun. And then let's see, the last night we were there, we headed out to Point Royale. And it's very dark out there and has a very nice panoramic horizon out there. And again, just set up, the sky was very clear. From this angle here, we have Flagstaff on the lower right. And then you got Tuba City and Page over on the left. And let's see here. Here's just another shot. This was with the 24mm. And you can see Mount Humphrey there and the last of the smoke plume. They got a pretty good handle on it by the last day we were there. And we got some good nebulosity showing up here. That's always fun to catch. Lagoon Nebula there, Sagittarius star cloud there. I think that would be Omega, Eagle. And then the Dark Horse. It's always interesting up there at the canyon when you look at the Milky Way to be able to see this leg of it, right? Because you just need the really solid dark sky to catch this part of it. You know, the rest of the Sagittarius star clouds show up pretty well, even if it's not so dark. But this piece, you know, good dark sky to catch that. So that was pretty nice. And let's see what else. And then again, just swinging the camera a little more towards the north. We got Cassiopeia down here. I think it's like right there. And just catching the other end of the Milky Way. At this particular point in time, you could actually see the whole Milky Way arch across the sky from Cassiopeia to Scorpius. So that was pretty cool. There were a couple other guys up here shooting on the same night, and I was talking with them. And they were doing some composite shots with the foreground. That was kind of interesting, where they were just cranking up the ISO, you know, taking the picture of the Grand Canyon there, and then we're going to overlay it on their pictures. And I thought, hey, that's kind of cool. Let me try that. It worked mostly, but I forgot to turn off my tracker. So I got nice blurred horizons. So it's like, all right, well, next time I'll remember that. So, you know, and then I don't know about anyone else, but whenever I set up, you know, you go, there's a whole checklist of stuff, and out of the, you know, dozen different things you got to get set up, I always miss one. So that's pretty par for the course. And I think that's it.
Thank you, Terry. I understand what you're talking about. If forgetting to turn off the tracker or turn on the tracker. It's
Yep.
like,
Yeah.
ooh,
That's what-
you know,
Yep, it's always something, right? I've
It's
even
always
done the
something.
classic, oh, the lens cap is on. Well, that's why.
nice shots. There's, I've been to the North Rim 20 times. That's one of my favorite places. Cold morning after a long hike across the canyon and having a mocha cappuccino or whatever with
Yep.
my boots right where yours were, looking out over the canyon as the sun's coming up. And it's like, there's nothing better.
Yep, it is very
Except
nice up
that
there.
beer when you come out after you've hiked across. I'll tell you that for a fact. But yeah, shooting at the canyon has got to be one of my favorite places to shoot, and shooting nightscapes. I mean, I won't say they're just easy, but they're easier than doing 6 hours of exposures with 14 filters and
Yep.
2 small budgies or something, trying to get a picture of a nebula. So yeah, nightscapes are really neat, especially when you can't see them until you shoot them. And
Yep.
yeah, you can barely see that texture, like you say, the dark horse. Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate you presenting. And for all of you other members who have not presented anything, what is it? You haven't been doing anything all summer long for the past 2 years during COVID? Get out and let us see some of the stuff you've been working on. We would appreciate it. I know that Rick gets some of the stuff from you guys for his newsletter, and we appreciate that. I think Rick does. It just makes more work for him, but nonetheless. So let's see what else. Any other questions? Any questions for Terry? I don't see anything popping up for him. So we're motoring right along here. We're not even going to break for cookies and a beer. So we're going to turn this over to Dr. Frank Timms. Quite a prodigious biography. He's with ASU, space and, I just screwed that up, Earth and Space Exploration College. And he's got any number of things that he's done. One of the interesting things, I think, he's the senior lead editor of the American Astronomical Society journals, which is like, wow, that's pretty interesting that you read a lot. So anymore through COVID, I've been reading a lot too, but not like that. So I will not get into the myriad things he's done and been and graduated from and what have you, but I will say, from looking at the student assessments of him, I think it was 95% of his students really liked him and really liked the fact that you can get a pretty good grade if you just follow through on the course. So he doesn't bust your chops. So I will turn it over to Dr. Timmies. I'm sorry, that was Timmies.
Well, thank you for that lovely introduction, Tom. You get an A for that.
Yay! Continuing credit.
There you go. There you go. Hi, everyone. My name is Frank, and I have 2 sort of mini talks I hope to get through in about 20 minutes each. So let's go ahead and start the first one. So Sky and Telescope on the American Astronomical Society YouTube channel. I did pose a question in the chat, so of course I can't see that when I'm presenting. So if you put it in the Q&A, I'd be curious to how many of you subscribe to Sky and Telescope, or if you subscribe to other magazines, and maybe say why. So that's primarily a print magazine. And as of roughly about 6 or 8 months, doing stuff on YouTube with those articles. And so I want to talk a little bit about how that started and what the state is and where it may go. And that'll be your chance to have some audience feedback on it. Somebody's got an open mic as we go. Okay, so I might as well define the AAS YouTube channel. So there's the URL. I can put that in the chat later when we get off. So check it out. It's a growing, burgeoning site on astronomy, both professional, amateur, and otherwise, other topics, astronomy in the US. And like I said, in about August or so, we started the Sky and Telescope series. So authors and editors will get on there and talk about their articles. So you may want to check that out. We're going to cover a few of what those articles are. So the organization of this talk is, I'm going to talk a little bit about the past. I will spend most of the time on the present and a little bit on the future. And this is where you get to give some feedback and joy. Okay. Origins. So the American Astronomical Society, which now owns Sky and Telescope. Okay, so that's one thing. They are part of the American Astronomical Society. The AAS, so I'll start saying AAS instead of American Astronomical Society because it's shorter and easier and quicker. The AAS actually started a YouTube channel back in about 2016. And from there, they put up, 5 opening videos, and then it just languished for 3 years, 4 years or so. And so as part of my duties, evangelism for the AAS, I took around and what could be done to promote the society and the journals. And I saw the YouTube channel and it was just sitting there doing nothing. And I said, well, this is something I can do. So the first year, so I started in April of 2019, and the first year was pretty much spent on the journals proper. So what is the business model of the Astrophysical Journal, the Astronomical Journal? How do you be an author of the professional literature? How do you be a referee as part of the literature? What are the ethics and professional standards you should hold up if you're going to be publishing in the AAS journals? So that kind of stuff. So, journals proper. And there's really only so much flavor in that stick of gum. And so after about a year, I was, okay, well, we got to do something a little different. So that's when I started deciding to try author interviews. So you'll see an article, you'll see something, and I thought it would be great to have the author actually talk about their paper, which is different than somebody giving a talk. Somebody gives a talk, okay, they'll cut a figure or two out of their articles and put them in a PowerPoint and show them, and that's all great. It's a standard seminar, standard talk, but very rarely do you actually get to talk about your article. So it's a little bit of unique content. So I did that for about 6 months, and I decided to broaden the scope from the AAS journals to other things that AAS operates, one of which is the Sky and Telescope magazine. And so the goal of that YouTube series on Sky and Telescope is to connect authors and editors with their articles. So you can actually see a picture of the person, see what they look like, see how they describe their article, and a bit about their human story. So a good part of the videos are particularly in the beginnings, are spent bringing the human element into the astronomy story. And then sharing that with the larger astronomy community, and because it's on YouTube, actually the whole world astronomy community. So that's a little bit about how it started. And the first articles that went up in August 20, and Rosalie Lopes started us off in August 2020, talking about, my screen share is in the way, ice volcanoes. And then that was followed up in September with Paul Byrne talking about the fate of volcanic worlds in our solar system anyway. Double Vision from Ron Brecher in October 2020. Ron's he's got quite an assortment of scopes, and he's a rather prolific writer. You probably ran into him. And then Who Operates the Science? That was done with Camille in November of 2020. That was followed by the Caldwell Catalog Turns 25 from Matt Waddell in December 2020. And followed up in January of 2021 by someone who's just down the road from us, Adam Block, who's done a number of fairly famous pictures on galaxies and otherwise. And so he gave a little chat on how to picture galaxies on his article there in January 2021. And then February, January, Orion's Club District and the Suburban Stargazers, how to look at stars if you're in a suburban area. That was Ken Hewitt-White. Followed that up by the person who chooses the observing article. So Diana, that was done in about February or March, I believe, for hers. That was a nice one. And then Ted Forte, not another Arizona. So Arizona is overrepresented in this series. Ted talked about the springtime blossoms and the clusters that one can see in the springtime. And then choosing an astrograph from Oleg, that actually turned out to be one of the top 10 videos on the site. So I think it's currently sitting at about the 5th most popular video viewed. And so he talks about choosing an astrograph. That was done in April of 2021. Then we had a conversation with the senior editor of Sky and Telescope, Kelly Beatty, who just recently led, you probably read about people getting on airplanes to go look at the June annular eclipse. And Kelly's the one who pretty much drives and organizes all that stuff. And so he talked a bit about those activities and his other things he's done over his 30-35 career at Sky and Telescope. Then there's news. There's always astronomy news, and who edits that stuff, who puts it up, and that's Monica Young. And so I had a chat with award-winning Monica Young there in May. And then in May we covered Hobart Schilling's Cosmic Power Ranger. So if that's a mysterious title, he's talking about cosmic rays and how much energy they have that come in and how you detect them. And then finally, Joe Rayo, who's actually a professional newsman on the East Coast, and he talked about June sunrise annular eclipse and all about it. And then coming up to be recorded here actually on Monday will be a chat with Bob King on his celestial calendar column, and that will be coming out July 1. So that's the extent of the series right now, and I'm anticipating releasing them. I have been releasing them at roughly a cadence, a frequency of about 1 per month. That seems to be about the right cadence, but it's open for stuff. So we've been going about 6, 7, 8 months now, and so there are some potential future directions as we come out of the pandemic, and artistic directions and otherwise. And so other, potential future directions include things like having other people do them. It need not be me doing all of them. It'd be nice to get some younger folks in there. It'd be nice to have a little bit more diversity in there. So that would all be good things. The frequency, is 1 a month good enough? What if you did 2 a month? What if you did 1 every other day? Maybe once a month is too frequent. So questions of frequency is open. Right now, they're all sort of just as we were doing right here. It's Zoom. And so maybe in the future, it might be interesting to try and do some on location stuff. Go and visit authors and editors and subscribers and talk about, do some stuff on location with my GoPro. Then there's also, you could do things that are not in the magazine. It need not be on the magazine. You could do things that has video content only. So for example, a star party or a trip to the Grand Canyon or something along those lines. So these are all potential future directions that are sort of in the air as we move out of the pandemic. And so I'd be really interested to hear what your suggestions are. If you haven't checked out the channel, do so, check it out. Feel free to share some suggestions. I'm not hard to find by email. I'm not hard to find on the web. So I'd be interested and curious in what you think. Okay. And that'll do on that one. So any questions, comments, chat or otherwise?
Yeah, Frank, quick question then. About how long is each of these talks? Or you do like half hour, hour, 3 hours?
It varies by the person. I let them roll. In general, I don't think there are any shorter than 20 minutes, but I don't think there are any longer than 40 minutes. So they go somewhere between 20 and 40 minutes. Yeah, it just depends on the topic, the length of the article. Some people are more chatterboxy, others are less. So just kind of depends. But in general, the YouTube algorithm these days tends to put weight on longer videos. There was a period of time when the weight was on 3 to 5 minute videos. And you can think about your own YouTube browsing habits, how long you'll watch a video before you bail out. 3 to 5 is still kind of where most people will drop out of a video. But nevertheless, the weights that YouTube has been putting on in order to put videos in front of people has been favoring longer format videos at this point. So I kind of hit that with the 20 to 40 mark.
And do you get any type of metrics on like how wide or how big of an audience you get on these?
Oh, absolutely. That's what YouTube's all about.
Give me the metrics.
Metrics. Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. So okay, I'll answer Terry's question and Steve's question. The American Astronomical Society has about 8,000 members. And a typical video on a research level astrophysical journal article will typically get 100 to 200 views after about a month or two. There are exceptions. There are some videos that have thousands of views. Oleg's is an example one. There are other ones that we're talking about. The new 500-meter radio telescope in China, that one has 3,500 views. Sky and Telescope has a subscriber base that is roughly about 5 times larger. So roughly about 40,000 people subscribe to Sky and Telescope. And accordingly, videos that are on Sky and Telescope articles typically have roughly about 5 times larger viewpoints. They're just more amateur astronomers and they're all professionals, and so that's fine. So on the ones I just showed you, Sky and Telescope, typically 500 after a couple months. Oleg's was a little bit of an exception. He's already just about ready to clear 1,000. So in the big YouTube scheme of things, of course, this is nothing. This is tiny potatoes, right? We're not doing makeup. We're not doing cats. We're not doing goofy things. Is trying to take astronomy seriously. Whether one is professional or amateur doesn't really matter. You're still taking it seriously. And so I understand that we're never going to have the million viral video. That's just not going to happen. But it seems to be going well. The leadership at Sky and Telescope and the leadership at AAS seem quite pleased with how things are going. So, Steve, are they advertised in Sky and Telescope? No, at least not currently. Maybe that will change over the next 6 months, a year. I don't know. They do get a fair amount of advertising by the AAS. So every time a new video comes out, they pump it out on their social media feeds. As does Sky and Telescope, push it out on their social media feeds. If you ever go to an American Astronomical Society meeting, they're pushed there. They're advertised a little bit there. But overall, I would say diffusion is a slow process. So word is still getting out about these. They're still letting people know. So for example, this talk right here is an example of getting the word out on these things. So. And you'll have an impact when, if imitation being the sincerest form of flattery, that when Astronomy Magazine or what was the other one somebody mentioned there, Night Sky or some of the other professional journals start doing the same sort of thing on YouTube, then you'll know you've had some sort of an impact. So. Why did the AAS take over Sky and Telescope? So Sky and Telescope has had about three owners. And the most recent one was a corporate owner who essentially mismanaged it. And so it was going to fold after its very long, illustrious career because they weren't making money. They were losing money. And so the owner decided to sell it. As it turns out, the press officer for the American Astronomical Society used to be an editor the editor-in-chief of Sky and Telescope. And so one thing went to another, and if you're interested in a number, the AAS bought it for basically a cool $1 million. And it's been doing much better. In some sense, Sky and Telescope has found a natural home for itself among astronomers, as opposed to some commercial entity that's simply trying to squeeze dimes out of the thing. You know, the AAS is a nonprofit status, so I think it's working out well. And I wish Sky and Telescope a happy long life in the AAS.
I concur. It's a great magazine to loan out also, but I did subscribe finally rather than wait on getting back issues.
Yeah, and if you just want to check out some stuff, you can always go on the YouTube channel, check out the authors, check out the articles, see if it's interesting to you, and maybe that'll, you know, commit you to subscribe to the magazine or take one of their airplane flights for the next eclipse, whatever it may be.
Any other questions on the subject? It was quite interesting. I had not heard that you guys had taken over Sky and Telescope. So,
Yep.
see, did we get everybody? I think everything has been taken care of. If you want to continue on to your next subject.
Okay, we're going to shift gears a little bit here. So bolt your caps on. I'm going to roll. Okay, so let's see. I need to get out of this one. So let me get out of this one. Yeah, okay, I'm out of this one. Now I need to put the other one in presentation mode. Okay, I'm good there. And let's go back and screen share. Okay, so this is current research. So this is some new results on stellar neutrinos. I have a number of colleagues here, graduate students, faculty at Arizona State University. We also have a number of other collaborators around the world in Amsterdam, Dresden, and Trinity College up in the Northeast, and then me. So this presentation is tuned a little bit to the Savaro Astronomy Club. So let's go. So I like roadmaps. You saw that in the previous talk. I put up the past, present, and future. And so here's a little roadmap of what we're going to cover. So I want to talk a little bit about neutrino astronomy. I want to talk about neutrino production in stars. I will talk about how to calculate models of stars. And I will show you the world's first neutrino HR diagram. And then we'll talk about using neutrino detectors as actual telescopes to identify objects in the sky. Okay. So over the next decade, neutrino astronomy will probe the rich astrophysics of neutrino production in the sky. And everyone is probably really aware of a fairly recent event that would have been quite the production site of neutrinos, and that is Betelgeuse. This is a shot from Bob King, Sky and Telescope, 22 December, on Betelgeuse, everyone's favorite next supernova. Or maybe you have other ones, VY Canis Majoris, Eta Car, etc. But here Betelgeuse is already dim, right? Usually it's of order the brightness of Rigel. So we're already in a deep dimming phase here. And of course, everybody goes, oh, it's going to do supernova. It's going to do supernova. And of course it didn't, but it will sometime. 100,000 years, hard to say. But we're going to keep coming back to Betelgeuse. This is going to be a recurring theme on Betelgeuse is everyone's favorite next kind of supernova. So Betelgeuse didn't go off. So this means that our current neutrino detections, things we have detected neutrinos in. So in addition to the sun, it's basically measuring the CNO nuclei in the sun, the rate of fusion, nuclear fusion in the sun. Supernova 1987A, the only supernova we've ever caught in neutrinos with technology from the 1980s. And most recently, the Blazar, active galactic nuclei, telephone number here. This is done with the Ice Cube collaborations. This is a telescope under the ice in Antarctica. And so these are the only three that we've ever detected neutrinos. But there's an entire new generation of neutrino detectors online, had just come online in the last year or so and are coming online. Examples are going to include things like Super Calmaeo Candide with gadolinium, right down here. I'll talk about this one in a little bit. Juno, the Geomang Underground Neutrino Observatory, which is going to start taking data in 2021. Xenon, which is actually a dark matter experiment, being transitioned over to also trying to detect neutrinos. And so all of these are designed to open new avenues for potentially observing currently undetected neutrinos. So I'm going to spend a little bit on Super K with gadolinium. And so here's what Super K normally does. You've probably seen those pictures of these big underground water tanks, right? Pure water, and they're surrounded by Chirkanoff radiation tubes. Right? And so what happens is the neutrino comes in, it hits a proton in the water, it sends off a positron, which is going faster than the speed of light in water. And so it sets off what's known as Chirkanoff radiation. That's why the glow kind of blue. And you detect that. But also because it's a weak interaction, you've got a neutron coming out, and for the last 30 years, nothing was ever done with that neutron. So you're losing information that you never really got. But with the doping of gadolinium, that neutron interacts with gadolinium. And why gadolinium? You choose gadolinium because it has an enormous cross section for sucking up neutrons. And so they're like neutron sponges. And so when that neutron is absorbed, it goes into an excited state. Eventually that excited state decays, and when it does so, it emits a gamma ray, a photon, and you can detect that photon. And so this is the new signal that you're getting. And so now you're actually using all of the data that you can get from an experiment like Super K. Okay. And in fact, so this was the announcement of Super K actually opening and operating. This was done in November 2019. And I just want to highlight some of the stuff in blue. And so they estimate that they could detect around 200 events. So if you like, so an event is a photon, if you want to think of terms of photons. So we could catch 200 photons, we could catch 200 neutrinos in the final 12 hours before core collapse of a massive star, 15 to 25, at around 200 parsecs, which is kind of the typical distance that you would get for, here we go, we're back to Betelgeuse, picking up Betelgeuse. And that's really interesting. And so they can, their sensitivity of the instrument is such that they can go out to 600 parsecs away. So order 1,200 light years away. Wow, really? 1,200 light years? That's that's an interesting volume. How many supernova could they possibly pick up inside of 600 parsec? Answer, here's my sky telescope drawing for this. 31. There's 31 supernova candidates, massive star supernova candidates within 600 parsecs, and they are all listed here, along with their OBAFG characterizations, Ks and Ms. The name of the potential supernova is given there. Also its mass. This was, for example, a 9 solar mass, whereas Betelgeuse, here's Alpha Ori, has a estimated mass of 12 solar masses, and it's a distance of about 200 parsecs or so there. So this is how many, this is what they can go after. And if you want to know if these detectors can be used as a telescope, well, we'll get there. We're going to talk about that. Okay, so that's how many they could detect with current sensitivities. So I want to explore some recent theoretical results that provide new targets for these current and near future neutrino detectors. New estimates of the stellar neutrino background. You've probably heard of the cosmic microwave background. So this is sort of the same thing, except it's in neutrinos. And then it also offers new opportunities for nuclear astrophysics on interesting things to measure that will impact neutrino signals at these neutrino telescopes. Okay. So let's talk about briefly, let's talk about where do neutrinos come from in stars? How do they do that? Stars radiate energy by two mechanisms. They lose energy by two mechanisms. The first is the visible light. You lose photons from the stellar surface, the photosphere, as they come out, but you also lose energy from the stellar interior from neutrinos. And this is a lovely little diagram here of a sun-like star. So we've got the core down here sitting at about 15 million K, 150 grams per cubic centimeter. You've got the core where the nuclear reactions, where the neutrinos are being produced, and photons, high energy photons are being produced here. Then you go through the radiative zone. You've got a tachocline where you reverse rotation directions, and you have the bubbling surface, the convection zone. Finally got the photosphere, and then you have the corona. And for a sun-like star, it's about 5,700 K at the photosphere. So photons have a small cross section, about 10 to the minus 24 centimeters squared. And on average, this is their mean free path. So this is how far they go before they bump into something. And so it's only 0.3 of a centimeter or so. And so here is the photon, high energy photon produced in the core. Takes roughly about 100,000 years as it does sort of this Brownian motion, this random walk from the core to finally hitting the photosphere. And it's produced down here as a high energy gamma ray. And when it leaves as a visible light photon, there's been, for every one gamma ray produced down here, you get about 1,600 visible light photons emitted. So it's a down cascading of the energy. Neutrinos, on the other hand, have a cross section that is 20 orders of magnitude smaller. Okay, neutrinos just don't interact with much. And so, you know, the proverbial story, they go through a light year of lead without interacting much. And so they just go booming straight out of the core on timescales of about 2 seconds for a sun-like star. So those are the two mechanisms by which stars lose energy. Most of the time, the photons are dominating that energy loss, but not always. And in particular, massive stars, as they approach supernova, their primary energy loss is neutrinos. Okay. So how do you produce neutrinos? Well, neutrinos are produced by two ways. You can just do thermal processes. Anything that's hot, that's a thermal process, can produce neutrinos. So for example, pair neutrinos, you can have a positron and an electron come in and they'll interact, and what they produce is a neutrino and antineutrino pair. And there are other processes here. You can have photoneutrinos, you can have plasmons, you can have the equivalent of a Bremsstrahlung kind of process. Basically anything you can do with photons, you can do with neutrinos. It's the same thing. Shown here in green is a track from massive stars. So massive stars tend to evolve in a state of balanced power, where the energy losses from neutrinos is equal to the energy that you're producing by nuclear reactions in the core. And so this is sort of a track of equal production and equal losses. So everything's balanced. But the primary purpose of this slide is neutrinos are produced by thermal processes. Just having a temperature is going to generate neutrinos. Neutrinos are also produced by weak reactions, where basically through a variety of mechanisms, you're going to turn a neutron into a proton and vice versa. And accompanying that transition from a neutron to a proton, you also get an electron or positron out, depending on which way you go. And you also get a neutrino or an antineutrino, depending on which way you go. So all of these are basically neutron-proton flips that happen inside of a nucleus. So two ways you can make neutrinos: reactions and thermal. Okay. So now I want to make a model of a star. So I need some sort of a tool to do that. How do you do that? How do you make a model of a star? And so one way to do that, currently the most popular way to do that, is with a piece of software known as MESA. So MESA is a software code that can be used for stellar astrophysics to solve the equations governing how stars evolve. This is a pretty picture of where various elements are in the solution to how MESA does its solution for how stars evolve. So I don't particularly want to talk about the details of this because it's technical detail, but like my sky and telescope talk I just talked about, what I do like to talk about is community. People are great. So MESA, as of January 2021, has an active user base of about 1,100. It's been out for about a decade, and I'd say over the decade, because people come and go, graduate students come and go, postdocs come and go, people move on, new people come in. I would say overall, over the past decade, we've probably seen a user base sum total of about 5 times that, about 5,000. MESA currently accounts for the vast majority of models in the current literature. And so it's had great market penetration. on being a tool. And it primarily does that by being free and open source. Anyone can download it, anyone can run it on a variety of machines, which was a complete game changer, because up until Mesa came out, everything was closed source, secret codes. You had to do the secret handshake with somebody and they might run some Stellar model for you. No more. So Stellar Evolution has been democratized, following the Berlin Wall, if you like. It is out there for anyone to use. This is the team of developers. So this is the current team. Mesa was originally developed by Bill Paxton right here. And there's other cast of characters you can see here. Bill is an interesting character. It is very, very hard to get away from Bill Paxton. You probably touch Bill Paxton every day and you don't even know it. Bill is a computer scientist, and Bill was actually about Adobe's third or fourth employee. And so one of the things that Bill invented was how to render fonts on a screen with vector, otherwise known as scalable font technology. And if you've ever heard of PostScript, so the instantiation of that is PostScript. So Bill invented PostScript as a way of drawing vector fonts, like what you're seeing on your screen right now is almost certainly vector font driven. And so even just looking at your screen, you're seeing a piece of technology that Bill wrote. And of course, PostScript then became PDF. So if you've ever touched a PDF, embedded in there is scalable font technology. And so Bill gave the world PostScript, PDF, scalable vector graphics, all of that. So he went and retired, did a bunch of things you might think you do if you were one of Adobe's early employees, and decided at some point he came back, decided he was tired of doing what you might do if you had lots of early Adobe stock, and decided he wanted to do something in stars. And so that was sort of the birth point of Mesa. That's when he reached out to this fellow over here, Lars Bildstein, reached out to me, and that was the core of what eventually became known as Mesa. And so lots of developers at this point spread around the globe. But I do want to mention Mesa is just one, whether you've got this entire universe of software that lies between telescopes. So here's a number of common telescopes in use in the profession: Hubble, Cumming James Webb, NuSTAR. Here's our neutrino detector, Super K with gadolinium, and also connecting experiments, laboratory astrophysics you do on the ground. So these are things like nuclear reactors, nuclear experimental facilities, FRIB, rare isotope beams, whether you use Z-pinch, so at Sandia, or whether you use diamond anvil to squeeze stuff together to get, for example, hydrogen at very high densities. But it connects what you do in the lab with what you see on the sky, and there's an ocean of software that takes care of that. It's very hard to do astronomy without software. I bet every single one of you uses software, you do some sort of astronomy. So Mesa is a key part, but it's only one. So let's get on to some of the science result now that we know how neutrinos are made, thermal and reaction, and we know how to calculate a stellar model. So let's do it. And so you go ahead and do it. And so you can run Mesa on a variety of stellar masses shown here in various colors, in greens and then blues, reds. And this is a classic. This is a 110-year-old diagram. It's a Hertzsprung-Russell diagram. On the x-axis here is the effective temperature or the color of the star, or the OBAFG sequencing, spectral sequencing. So cool is over here, hot is over here. Yes, it's astronomy diagram. They love their backwards axes. So red over here, blue over here. And then on the y-axis is a measure of how luminous or how bright it is. So this is dim and this is bright up here. And this is, of course, a theorist HR diagram. If I was doing observations, I'd be doing a color magnitude diagram. So I'd have some measure of color, which is the effective temperature, and some magnitude, which is the equivalent of a luminosity. So stars are born on the zero-age main sequence. I'm not going to go through all stellar evolution. I will just do it very briefly here. So all stars are born on the zero-age main sequence. Low mass stars, as they burn that hydrogen, they peel off and they become a red giant. Then they ignite helium and they come back down a little bit, and then eventually they run out of helium in their cores and they ascend the red branch again to become asymptotic giant branch stars, where they puff out their outer envelopes, become planetary nebula, for example, as they transition over, and eventually become a white dwarf. So this is the low mass star regime. High mass stars, those roughly about greater than 10 times the mass of the sun, basically evolved straight across the HR diagram from the 0-inch main sequence over to cool red giants, and then where they blow up and producing lots of neutrinos that we hope to detect. Okay, so this is stellar evolution in a nutshell in the classic 110-year-old HR diagram. So you don't mess with a classic, or do you? What if you change the y-axis? Gasp, changing the classic, you can't do that. So what if instead of photon luminosity here, this is luminosity in photons, what if you changed it to neutrinos? So what if you changed the messenger from photons to neutrinos? What does that even look like? Well, there you go. On the left is a diagram I just showed. This is the evolution of stars from their photon output. And on the right is the world's first neutrino HR diagram. So we published this in February 2020. So it's a little over a year old now. And so this is the evolution of stars with neutrinos on the y-axis. Again, it's the same phases of evolution. And in fact, we even keep the same x-axis, right? So it's still the color of the star, red over here, blue over here, etc. So the only thing that's changed is I've changed the y-axis, and you get a vastly different looking figure. The one thing I will bring up at this point is just the difference, topological difference between the two. On the left, the photons, it looks relatively smooth, right? Things gradually change, gradually the curves are smooth, etc. And why? Well, we covered that a little bit because photons diffuse, right? It takes 100,000 years for a photon to get out. So this diffusion is a smoothing process. And so you get generally fairly smooth looking curves when you look at photons. On the other hand, as we talked about, neutrinos don't wait to get out of the core. They go booming out in 2 seconds. And so there's going to be a lot sharper transitions. There's no smoothing of nuclear events that take place. So for example, when you undergo a helium flash or when you undergo a thermal pulse, you get these big spikes. Those are real. They're not an artifact of the calculation. They're the fact that these things happen on short time scales and neutrinos go racing out. And so you get these very sharp looking events. Of interest that we'll talk about here is these big rises for massive stars. Instead of kind of going over in the HR diagram, they go over here and then they just sort of skyrocket, basically straight up, producing ever more neutrinos as they get closer and closer and closer and closer to core clouds. And so this is what is observable now. And so this is the point of giving targets to these new neutrino telescopes. This is observable now to those 31 stars I showed you, that if they go off, these things are going to be detectable. Low mass stars, lots of orders of magnitude less. Highly unlikely we're going to get these. But as time goes on and the sensitivity of these detectors goes on, you're going to be pushing the area, the lower bound of this detection box, the detectable limit, further and further down. And as you push your sensitivity of the instrument gets better, you're going to be able to see more stars. You will be able to, just like an optical telescope, and potentially more neutrinos from supernova explosions at greater distances. Okay. And so to me, people have generally, one reaction that is common to this. Why are you looking at neutrinos? Nobody's ever going to detect a neutrino. It's an incredibly rare event. Why are you doing this? And so it sort of reminds me a little bit of gravitational waves. 30 years ago, people asked the same question about gravitational waves. Why are you calculating gravitational waves as something? Nobody's ever going to detect those. Well, here we are, 2021, we have LIGO Virgo, and gravitational waves is big news as we get, neutron stars and compact objects and spiraling and going boom. And so it's a new astronomy with gravitational waves. And so I think this situation is somewhat similar. Maybe it will be 25, 30 years before the ingenuity of those instrument builders and experimentalists drop the sensitivity of the instruments until it gets really interesting, and all of a sudden you'll have a whole new astronomy on neutrinos. So we pointed this out, and we pointed this box out in a piece of work we did in 2017. This is Rachel Patton. And again, we come back to Betelgeuse. It's a recurring theme in this talk. And so we pointed out in these calculations, exploring what the neutrino signal was, that a prime example is the red supergiant Betelgeuse, alpha Or. At a distance of 200 parsec, a pre-supernova signal would be practically background free in energy windows that are observable right now. And most importantly, you will be able to observe those pre-supernova neutrinos. So before the star goes boom, up to 10 hours before the star goes boom. Well, this is huge. And it got picked up again by the Super K gadolinium collaboration, because after this is the hours before collapse. So this is 10 hours before collapse. This is 1 hour before collapse. This is 6 minutes before collapse. And this is on the y-axis, basically how many events are they going to detect. And so 10 hours, you're already going to detect hundreds of events, a couple hundred events. And the important part of this is that then you can give the electromagnetic communities, photon observers, and the gravitational wave community a heads up. Hey, something's going to go boom in 10 hours, because otherwise everybody's just reactive, right? As Terry mentioned, and then we looked at that mylar. Oh, is that a supernova? Right? So that's after the fact. So here's something that will actually give you a heads up that, hey, that mylar balloon's going up. Hey, a supernova is coming. Get ready. And so it's a very interesting alert. And so I just love the casualness with which this is dropped. The pre-supernova could be provided to the gravitational electromagnetic. Could be. I think that would be huge news if they did that. That would be wild. So let's say you do detect a signal. How do you know which star it came from? Can you use these instruments as telescopes? And the answer to that is going to be yes. And we're going to talk about how you use these experiments as telescopes. So as we talked a little bit about, when on these detectors like Super K with gadolinium, the antineutrino or neutrino comes in, it's going to pop a proton. It's in one of those water molecules in the tank. And of course, what comes off is a positron. This is the normal, what is detected. For 30 years, this has been detected. And the neutrino goes off, and until now it wasn't detected. So it bounces around in the water. That's why the Kirby path here. So it has to thermalize. And then eventually when it thermalizes, it will be captured by the gadolinium. And then that gadolinium will be excited, decays, off comes gamma ray. And so you have two pieces of information. You can see this light right here. You can detect where this gamma ray comes in. And so it's telling you an angle between when the where the neutrino comes in. So this is a measurable item, this angle. And it is this angle that you measure in the detector that is going to give you directionality on the sky. Okay, so that's kind of cool. So current detectors, bottom line is that you're going to be able to localize a supernova within about 70 degrees at 90% confidence level after you get about 200 of them. So that's okay. I mean, you're eliminating most of the sky, and I'll show you an specific example of one here. But upcoming detectors, so for example, here, what you're going to do is you're going to dope it with lithium. So you're going to put lithium in the detector, and this helps boost the detection efficiency. You could localize it to 15 degrees. Well, that's pretty good. Now you're starting to nail down, specific regions on the sky on that. And so the future, right now we can do okay. We'll be able to do much better here, let's say over the next 5-10 years. And so let's take a look at a specific example of what these mean. So Antares. Antares is an interesting event that it is potentially detectable. It's about a 15 solar mass star, so it's well within the supernova range. It's closer than Betelgeuse, actually. It's about 170 parsecs. That should be KPC. Typo. Okay. Okay, and so this is the entire sky, Molenweed projection. And so this is Antares over here, and this kind of a projection. So this is right ascension, this is the declination. And so, for example, current detectors, everything here's, so LS here is a liquid scintillator, a current one. And so everything in here is eliminated. And so you would know that the supernova was somewhere in this region where my cursor is. Don't know where, but you've eliminated most of the sky. On the other hand, over the next 5 or 10 years, at the 95% level, and this is 4 hours to go before the event, you've narrowed it down to just 2 events. It could be one of these 2 events. Well, that's 2 events out of an entire sky. That's pretty good. You've nailed it down. But this is at T-4 hours before explosion. Now, as you get to T-1 hour before explosion, even current detectors can eliminate the bulk of the sky and say, well, it's got to be somewhere in here. And of the known objects that can become supernova, there's only 4. So now you're down to 1 of 4. So that's pretty good. But in the future, you're going to be able to say, even at 1 hour, no, that's definitely Antares. It's going off. And here it is, T-2 minutes before core collapse explosion. So with current detectors, it's the orange line here. You've done much better. You've reduced more of the sky, and you're still down to about 4 objects. And at future detectors, you're going to be able to absolutely say, yep, it's this event that is coming. Okay. So that's pretty cool. You can use these neutrino experiments as neutrino telescopes. Okay. And at this point, it's 8:52 p.m. in Arizona. We've been talking for a while. And so probably I encourage you all to go out and have a little bit of a neutrino cocktail. And I want to thank you for your time and thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, Doctor. That was quite fascinating. I do have a question, unfortunately.
I love questions.
You were talking about 2 basic ways for neutrinos to form. One was with heat. Now, is there a volume issue between the massive colder stars or the smaller, hotter stars, where do the hotter stars not produce as much, even though they do produce, and temperature, you said, was one of the major constituents of causing neutrinos. I'm a little confused on why smaller stars don't generate so many neutrinos, whereas you're showing massive neutrinos towards the end of large, colder stars. Is the difference in the temperature is just not large enough to make that much difference?
Okay, let's go to that chart diagram. Okay. In order to get nuclear reactions going in the core, temperatures are generally above 10 million degrees Kelvin in the core. Okay. So that would be stars like here, like stars like the sun. There's the sun right there. Here it is sitting on the main sequence, just like we are right now. And so the temperature is about 10 million. So if every star had the same temperature, core temperature, then obviously a star, I hope it's obvious, that a star with a bigger core would produce more neutrinos just because you got more material that's hotter, right? So you would get more neutrinos that way. So it's a combination of 2 things. It's number 1, how hot you are, because that determines how many neutrinos. The higher the temperature, the more thermal processes you can have, but also the mass of the core. Small cores are going to produce little neutrinos. Massive cores are going to produce larger. But it's not true that all stars have the same core mass size as the sun. In fact, as you go higher and higher in mass, it gets hotter and hotter in the core, and the cores get bigger and bigger. So it's a combination of 2 things on the main sequence. So the hotter you are, the more neutrinos you produce. The larger region where you're having nuclear burning, the more neutrinos you produce. And so that accounts, well, this is on the main sequence. And by the time you get over here, these cores are super hot. These cores are on the order of about 10 billion degrees. So they're extremely hot. You won't find a hotter temperature in the universe. You want to find the hottest temperatures in the universe? Star undergoing core collapse. They're extremely hot, although the mass is not that large. It's about 1.5 times the mass of the sun. So they compensate for a small mass size by being extremely hot. Does that help a little bit?
Yes, that explains it much better than what I was thinking. I'd forgotten it wasn't the corona heat, it was the core heat.
Core heat. We're always in neutrinos, we're talking about the core.
So it's not the color blue, it's not the color red, it's the core heat.
Correct. Right. So another way to plot this diagram. So I like it this way because it's, this is an observable. Well, in principle, T effective luminosity. Instead, it's usually a color magnitude diagram. that is observable. But you can convert that into sort of the theorist's fantasy here of temperature versus luminosity. So this is all, both axes are observables in principle. And so I wanted to do the same thing here. So this is an observable. This is the surface temperature, as you mentioned, the surface temperature of the star. Is it the corona? Is it blue? Is it red? Versus an in principle detectable luminosity. And so, but another way to do this plot would, instead of putting the surface temperature down here, is put the core temperature down here. Some things get a little clearer when you do that. On the other hand, core temperatures are generally not observable. So plus
It's theoretical.
Correct.
Yeah, but it'd still be
Not
interesting.
that I have any qualms about that.
I would hope not. No, because that would be interesting to see, though. I would shoot me one. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. So, are there any other questions? Come on.
Yeah, I had a question here.
Yeah, Terry.
So at the beginning of the presentation, you showed a number of facilities where these detectors are hosted. Are these facilities owned by governments? Are they independent? Are they multinational? Are they all owned by Elon Musk? How's that work?
Yeah, good question. In general, they're national with a lot of international partners. So for example, Super K with gadolinium is in Japan. And so it's primarily funded by the Japanese government, but they have a whole lot of partners who provide various pieces of technology that are in different countries, whether it's Germany or South Africa or the US. And that's fairly typical of large facilities like this. Generally, one country takes the lead, but there's a lot of partners pitching in. So the same is true with Juno. Juno a little bit less, that one's in China, so it's mainly Chinese driven. So a little bit less international partnership there than quote normal, but it's still there. Xenon is a US experiment, more of a desktop experiment, really. Some of these other facilities are large, whereas Xenon is a little bit more of a desktop type of experiment. So there it's really just API in their group, being able to build this on in a regular size room. And in general, when I say funding by the government, it usually means their science funding pool, whatever it is. So here in the US, that would be the National Science Foundation, NASA, Department of Energy, DOE. It just depends on the particulars of who wants to cover what.
Okay.
Another simple chemistry question. Again, well, it's not quite simple chemistry question. If I'd have done physical chemistry, I could have had my minor in chemistry in college, but I didn't because it was a killer course and I was lazy. Gadolinium, I've never heard of that. Is that on the periodic table? Is that man-made?
Periodic table, GD, gadolinium.
Wow, gadolinium. I've got to look at this. It must have been discovered after I got out of school. There were only like 16.
You wear it well then, you're quite young. You wear it well. Yeah, check it out. It's on the periodic table. It's a naturally occurring element, gadolinium.
A new one for me. Thank you. Okay. Any more questions? That was interesting. I'm still just amazed that I hadn't heard that AAS had bought or acquired Sky and Telescope. And it's like,
really? Yeah.
Well, I'm mainly an astronomy magazine reader, but I in the past year I've subscribed to Sky and Telescope. So, and it's like, wow, one more magazine, it's not going to kill me. And I do try to pass them on.
Very good. Yeah, I hope between those two talks, I hope I covered the spectrum. I mean, the purpose of giving the two talks there of, sort of two different points in the spectrum. And so I understand that any given audience will have a range of interests. So hopefully between the two of those, I hit a little something for everyone on what they enjoy.
One more question, if I could.
Yeah.
Any advantage to putting detectors like that in orbit, or is that just a waste of money?
I thought you were going to go to the moon, but far side of the moon. For neutrino detectors, because the best ones tend to be massive, right? So not good to put in space, even on the far side of the moon. So look at it this way. Neutrinos don't interact with much. So in order to increase the odds, you need a big mass, and big mass weighs. And so it would cost you 14 arms and a leg to put that up in space. And you're not gaining anything by doing that, other than putting a big bag of almost pure water, let's say, in space. Oh, that would be interesting. It's a big water balloon in space. Oh, and to reach back to your other point, no, most of the private entities, as you mentioned, Elon, but there are others, Jeffrey and Brandon. Most of those are aimed at delivering basically sort of an Amazon delivery service for NASA, right? So moving up to the ISS and back and putting stuff in orbit. And so it's like, it's a service to the space agencies. But the other ones I think they're really looking at as a moneymaker in the future will be tourism, right? Go to the Great Grand Canyon in the sky. And so that's primarily what they fund, is both the service side to space agencies, whether it's NASA or Japanese or otherwise, and space tourism. They have less interest in pure science experiments. Although it has always been true in astronomy, going as far back as you want to go, that astronomy has always benefited from rich benefactors. So whether that's like telescope or Keck telescopes, or, you know, there's always been a propensity for rich individuals to put their money into astronomy.
Yeah, I would be, when I win that next lottery, the massive multi-millions. Yeah, I'm gonna, well, for one reason, I'm gonna suck up to some people, or have them suck up to me and let me come in and see some of their stuff.
Awesome.
That's the thing. So trust me, you'll get a grant when I win that lottery.
I hope you win the lottery. That is awesome. Very cool.
Tom, I see Tom Monson's showed up today too. So anything you want to part with before we part, Tom?
No, it's just two great talks there, Frank. Nice job.
Thank you.
Yes,
Tom.
they were interesting. Okay, we have a question off topic. Reportedly, the Hubble is broken. Anybody hear about that?
I have not. What do you mean by?
Well, their computer is having trouble rebooting, and they're trying to figure out which piece is broken in there and how to get around it, or maybe it's a glitchy component that they can bypass. So they're troubleshooting right now.
Okay, thanks.
Did they try turning it off and turning it back on again?
Yeah.
The good old standby.
Or hit it, you know, but there's nobody up there to hit it. So what are you going to do?
Yeah, if they had it in the lab, they'd be poking with probes and all that kind of stuff. But
Gently.
yeah, the way they can probe it right now is limited, so it takes time.
And also give a push for James Webb Telescope. So one will be in its final legs, and the other will be a newbie going up. That means there'll be problems on both sides.
Don't get my hopes up. Yeah. It's like,
Yeah, I know.
You're seeing James Webb's telescope. Is it real?
Yeah, I've been hearing about James Webb for a decade, and I'm still waiting. Same thing with what is now called the Vera Rubin Observatory, LSST. Yeah. Next year. It's always next year. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm just impatient, I guess.
Okie doke. Well, again, thank you very much. Dr. Timmis,
Yep.
say your last name, please.
Timmy's.
Okay. For some reason, I just can't. No, I'm sorry. That's not right.
It's okay. I answered anything.
I used to answer Curly and some other more derogatory things I won't bring up right now. But thank you again. I appreciate your late minute substitution. And guess what? You won't have to do this in July then. So,
All right.
although you are welcome back anytime you want to come and talk to us, because
Oh, thank you for the invitation.
By all means. So, anybody have any weeds, any seeds, anything to bring up? Anything that's happening this weekend in their lives that they want to talk about? Okay, one last comment about.
Yeah, just real quick, Tom. Any word from Grand Canyon on if they're ever going to open up and have the facilities available again, or just nobody knows?
Well, actually, there. I was watching a video that was generated and put on the web yesterday by the Grand Canyon Conservancy about and with the superintendent for this Grand Canyon National Park, and he was talking about the various problems, and the major problem right now, being COVID, but even with that being out of the way, the next major problem is rebuilding the water line that supplies both rims. It's just a massive undertaking, and if you get a chance, go to the Grand Canyon Conservancy, and you can probably find the YouTube link to the talk. They have a little bit of technical difficulties, but it talks about a variety of things that is keeping a lot of the stuff from reopening. Although it's open for hiking, which I don't want to say they're discouraging at the moment, but it is not the way it used to be when I was hiking, because most of the facilities, especially like Phantom Ranch, aren't open. So you just blow past it. I used to work for ADEQ, the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, and evidently there is a consent order at Phantom Ranch to get their wastewater treatment system working better. So don't drink out of the stream. So there should be some fresh water somewhere around there. So yeah, there are better places than me to find out about what's happening in the canyon, but that's what I know to be the case so far. So for all you members out there that are still listening, we do want you to present something that you've done. We miss you, your smiling faces. We don't have the back table to see all the stuff you've brought in for swapping and selling, but you can do that with Rick's newsletter if you have stuff. So he would also like to hear what you've done, seen what you've done, if you've done anything pretty cool. So please send in your emails with your gibberish. Some people may not want to see it, but some of us might like to see it. So it's a crapshoot. So if there are no more questions, I'm going to gavel us out of here. Again, thanks to all who participated and presented. So here we go. 2, 3, 1.
Bye.
You're all allowed to leave now.